Hello and welcome. I'm Samantha Swain with Swain Strategies, and today we have a free webinar for you about Fundraising Events 101. Our goal is to give you a couple of basic building blocks to be able to launch your fundraising event from. And before we begin, I wanted to let you know a little bit about this webinar series. So this is one of 4 webinars that are a precursor to our upcoming Elevate conference. And the Elevate conference is a 2-day conference that is a deep dive into fundraising event school. At this conference, we have a bunch of amazing partners that are there to support us in solutions and resources for all of our fundraising event needs. It is a 2-day school for your fundraising event, with day 1 really being the fundamentals. We have sort of fundraising event 101 all the way through into day 2, which is a higher level concepts we're calling Fundraising Event University. We have some incredible speakers lined up for you, including our amazing MC Crystal Chanel and a DJ Avalanche joining us for the conference. All of our speakers are bringing lots of insight and experience and a deep depth of knowledge into how to make your fundraising events really successful, especially in this year. We have some incredible panels for you, including a panel about meaningful event design, about soliciting those donors and sponsors, about marketing, especially now in the digital landscape and how that's changed, as well as an auction panel about how the auction has evolved in the past several years. We also have other free resources for you. The Fundraising Elevator podcast is a weekly podcast that is a deep dive with experts in all things fundraising and nonprofit, but we specialize in a lot of content about your fundraising events. So we hope that you'll subscribe. You can follow us anywhere you listen to your podcasts and get lots of details and information to support you. All right, let's dive into Fundraising Event 101. We hope to see you at Elevate. We hope to have you tune in and listen to the upcoming podcast. But today we are here to talk about fundraising events. So a little bit about fundraising events. Now, first of all, fundraising events really started in this place of an opportunity for folks to see and be seen. It was really a way of increasing social status. And the event landscape was developed at a time when a lot of partners, a lot of wives, of philanthropists were coming together and throwing these fancy exclusive gatherings as a way to bring people together around a cause. The focus traditionally has been on wealth capacity and joy and celebration, and a lot less on actual mission. And in the past decade, there's been a movement building to focus more on community-centric fundraising. Now, community-centric fundraising is the shift into really valuing people's time, skill, and contribution, and being a lot more inclusive with your fundraising. But those two models kind of were going head-to-head for quite some time. And we were struggling a lot with how to make sure to be community-centric while also creating the access for your entire audience, not just your high wealth individuals. And in the time of COVID, when things went virtual, when we had a lot of content that started to move to an online format, like today's webinar, we learned that there were a lot of ways to become a lot more inclusive and mission-centered in our fundraising events. That has been the trend that we have seen in the past 5 years as we've evolved into regathering. We're seeing people engaging more with mission. We're also seeing a generational shift in fundraising, in that those who were our boomer audience were much more invested in prizes and stuff and winning auction packages. And our younger millennial and Gen Z donors are much more interested in the impact and the mission and what changes they can make in their fundraising. So why fundraising events? You know, it is not the easiest way to raise money, and it is a lot of labor and a large lift to be able to bring revenue in for your fundraising event. And yet it is one of the most powerful opportunities that we have to garner support around our mission. So Susan Howlett of University of Washington has done quite a bit of research about what motivates people to give. And in her research, she has discovered that yes, people give because they believe in the mission and they want to make a difference, but they also give because they want to be known or recognized, and they want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And we have seen that in times of divide, in times where we're not in community, it is so easy to create sort of an us-them scenario. And yet when we are in community, it is so much easier. to care about each other and take care of each other, including the missions that you work so hard for. So fundraising events have become a fundamental way to keep people engaged and invested in mission. Now, Chronicle of Philanthropy does a research study every year about how people prefer to give. And year after year, their answers come back that the majority of donors prefer to give through events. 85% of donors on average prefer to give through fundraising events. And that is because they get that opportunity to connect to other people and network. They also get that opportunity to be recognized, seen, and celebrated for their support. So how do you begin to plan your fundraising event when we have a model that so often was about big, ornate, crazy, fabulous decor and design and food and very, 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 very expensive to produce? And we have a movement toward reconnecting people to mission and centering mission. So today with Fundraising Event 101, we want to dive specifically into how do you design your event now to better meet your audience where they're at? And the first step in doing that is to look at who your audience is. Understanding who you're trying to bring to an event, understanding who you're developing this gathering for is an important first step in developing your plan. Now, there are different fundraising models, event models that meet the needs of different audiences. I'm going to lightly touch on each of these, but the model that we focus the most on is the major donor model. And the reason for that, and the reason why you see so many organizations host major donor events, often called signature events or gala events, is because of all of the different revenue opportunities and the duration of these events as an opportunity to tell your story in a deep, meaningful way. But most of us have a donor continuum that looks a little like this, where we have a lot of people on one end of the continuum that either have never heard of us or give a tiny bit of support to us, and a few people on the other end of the continuum that give a lot of support for us. And it is our goal in the fundraising sector to be cultivating our donors and moving them through this chart so that we're moving them from being a first-time low-dollar donor to a high-end major donor. And that progression takes time and it takes developing a relationship. And often we get stuck in this place of trying to acquire new donors without involving or investing a lot of time into building relationships with the donors we already have and cultivating those donors to be biggest donors. And yet the first time gift is most often the lowest gift a donor will make. So let's talk about each of these models real quick. A crowdfunding model is great when you have a partnership with a local sports team or a restaurant where you're leveraging their audience, you're leveraging their marketing in order to gain some recognition for your organization with maybe a light touch donation. For example, all purchases will go toward this cause. Crowdfunding rarely actually acquires a new donor because you don't typically know who the individuals are. You're simply playing a numbers game of big audience to yield support for your mission and to raise some awareness. An acquisition model is typically a free event, breakfast or lunch often because they're cheaper to produce, where you are bringing folks together, leveraging your key stakeholders for a short, small gathering. Those key stakeholders bring new people to your organization to introduce them for the first time. There's a low dollar ask made, and typically individuals will make a $50 or $100 donation. This model is really relying on those key stakeholders to be bringing new people to your organization and engaging new people in your work. A little bit about that model, because I think we get stuck in the acquisition addiction. As soon as we start to see that year after year, the folks attending this event are repeat individuals, we can now move into an engagement model. An engagement model starts to add other revenue streams and now is designing for a specific audience because it's no longer a first-time acquisition, but it's now a specific donor demographic we can design to. Then our major donor event is often designed with our major donors in mind. Acquisition naturally happens because those folks bring friends and guests, but the major donor event is really our biggest opportunity to raise support And then a legacy event is an event that is designed specifically to move people into our annual giving or our planned giving societies. So today I want to dive into those middle three, because those middle three tend to be the majority of the events we see organizations working on. These tend to keep people in our donor stream and in our donor cultivation cycle. And they each have different revenue models associated. The first one is the acquisition event. This is really just an event designed to help you build relationship and leverages two types of revenue: sponsorship dollars, which are corporate dollars or support before the event that help you pay for the cost of the event. So it may be the business breakfast brought to you by the Small Business Administration. And the Small Business Administration would be your sponsor who's paying for the event. The second type of revenue is your special appeal, which is your direct ask for cash, giving people an envelope or a way that they can give during a short 1-hour program that tells the story about your event. This model really leverages the fact that you have key stakeholders in your organization, like board members or major donors already, that can host a table and bring 9 new people to be introduced to your organization for the first time. Oftentimes, these are short programs, light lift events that are either a house party, a breakfast, or a lunch, designed simply for the sake of acquisition and introducing people to your mission. Once you start to see that you have repeat audiences, now you can start to get more specific about who's in the room, and you can build an engagement event. An engagement event relies on both sponsor dollars and table sales. Now you're charging a ticket price to get in the door, and you may even be asking folks for cash contributions in advance if they're unable to attend. The day of the event is still similar. It is a breakfast or a lunch. It is a tight 1-hour program that is designed to tell the story about your event, but now it might more specifically design toward how those same business leaders can now become involved in your movement from the perspective of being an advocate within their own businesses. So your program can be designed very specifically for your audience, and you still make that special appeal, but it might be a more active special appeal with something like a paddle raise, where people visibly get to show their support for the organization. And finally, that major donor model, where you have the addition of things like a live auction, a silent auction, raffles, games. There tends to be more time in a major donor event. Oftentimes, major donors are bringing with them their spouse. So now they're making decisions about giving collectively, which is helpful to move giving. And you have more time. You have the ability to have an evening program. It's a little bit of a sort of longer time for socializing and gathering. And once upon a time, these events were heavy and laden with lots of effort going into things like silent auctions, raffles, and games. And with that shift of generational giving, we've seen a lot of these going away, and a lot of folks focused on the top of the revenue side, which is the sponsorships, table sales, the special appeal, and the live auction, to focus on relationship building and staff and committee time moving away from that transactional giving, because it's such low dollar and rarely actually moves people to become invested in the work of the organization. So if you're still doing lots of activities, think about maybe streamlining those into 1, maybe 2 games, so that you've had that chance to have a little fun. But for the most part, you're putting all your effort and energy into those higher yield, relationship-centered revenue resources. Once you've identified your audience and the model you're using, then you can start to build out step 2, which is, why are we gathering? So often we build our fundraising events based on a fundraising goal, and our why oftentimes is attached to a dollar amount. And I want to encourage you to think first about what is possible by bringing these people together in support of our mission. That is a hard question to answer, but really what you're looking to examine is, what do you want people walking away with? What do you want people knowing about your event, knowing about your organization, knowing about your mission, and telling other people about? This moves us into designing for why. What is the purpose of our gathering? Now, if you're familiar with an onion, and you're familiar with the fact that as you peel away layers, there's more layers underneath. And There is an exercise that we like to do with committees, with boards, with staff members to explore the why by asking that question 5 times. So we might, for example, ask, well, why are we gathering people? And often we'll get big, kind of long questions and answers, and then we'll ask it again. But why? What becomes possible when we gather? And the answers will get more specific, and we'll ask it again. But why? What impact do we want to make? And then they'll get more specific and we'll ask it again. But why? What is the change we want to see? And then finally, we'll ask, but why this gathering? And in that exercise, what we find is that committees and board members are able to get closer and closer and closer to a single impact that they want to make for their event, that then allows them to design an event that feels purposeful, it feels meaningful, and it feels important to the audience that's in attendance. That is the type of event that will stick. It's the type of event where your audience will remember your programming and share it with other people. And it's the type of event that is easy to make decisions around because you have a specific shared purpose for your gathering. Now, if you want to dive further into this idea of how to make a meeting or a gathering really matter, we highly recommend the work of Priya Parker. The Art of Gathering is a book that she wrote back in, I believe, 2019, I believe is when it came out, 2018 maybe. And she really examines this idea of how do we make our events more meaningful, and gather with an intention and purpose behind it and make every choice specific to that purpose. So the first thing that we want to do once we've identified our purpose is then begin to design for the purpose. And I have a few examples here I want to share with you. We do a lot of work with Community Warehouse. They are a furniture bank that helps folks who have formerly been unhoused and are moving into housing to get what they need to turn a house into a home. And in designing their event one year, they identified for us that the biggest need that they had was mattresses. Mattresses were something that if they didn't have them in stock, people would cancel their appointment and not come in to furnish their home. And if they did have them in stock, they'd get a rush of people coming in, all trying to be there at the time when the mattresses were available. So we hosted the event and the gathering in their warehouse. And the only thing we left in the warehouse were their mattresses and bedding available for folks to be able to see the importance of this one item. And we told the story that bedtime stories are better with a bed and the value of the mattress. And we announced that we had a mattress partner that was going to be sponsoring a mattress for every mattress purchased by an audience member. And you can see here that when we asked folks to raise their paddle and support the mattress purchase, every paddle in the room went up. And that was because they had a clear intention, a clear purpose about the impact that a mattress has on their mission. They told that story and they focused that story in their decision-making about the event. Another example, our friends at Hedgebrook. Hedgebrook is a writing center for women writers, and they lead with radical hospitality because they are taking care of the caretakers through radical hospitality. And that became the center of the purpose and design of their event. So every element of their event had a touch of radical hospitality. You can see here, this is their printed program on their plate with a hand-tied flower arrangement from the land that they reside on. Every element about the event led with radical hospitality, and it made the decision-making about their event easy to be able to focus on. It allowed them to share their stories. It allowed them to focus their program and to focus every element and decision of their event all the way to the venue and who was speaking on their stage based on this idea of where could they bring forward the best opportunity for radical hospitality. So that leads me a little bit into the program. Now, our time and attention is narrowing. People are not interested in investing 5 hours sitting and listening. They want the time to connect. And this has been emphasized to us post-COVID as the most important element of a gathering for our guests. And if we don't allow time for it, folks will interrupt the program and make time for it. So we are shortening and tightening programs significantly so that the time people are actually sitting and focused on programs is much shorter. But there's a couple of rules to that because we don't want to make it so short that we miss the opportunity for fundraising. So the first thing I want to emphasize is that this is an opportunity for you to raise money for your organization. So you want to focus on keeping the business of fundraising first. Do your fundraising early in the evening. Once you get them seated and you share your story about who you are, fundraising should be occurring before any other celebrations, any other honorees, any keynote speakers. And you want to focus your effort on what's going to raise the most money, which a live auction will raise significantly more money than a silent auction. But the paddle raise is the number one opportunity that you have for fundraising. And more in the past 4 years, we've seen people moving away from auctions entirely and sometimes even putting those auctions online and replacing it exclusively with a paddle raise because of the opportunity that you have. If you've never done a paddle raise, I encourage you to check out our webinar about the paddle raise because it's such a critical moment in your fundraising event. We have a short webinar just about the basics of a paddle raise. But let's take a look at that live versus silent auction component because this is a big shift we've seen in recent years. The silent auction yields for the same value of an item. Let's say you have $100 gift. That $100 gift in a silent auction is only going to yield you about 40 to 45% of value. That same time, attention, and value item in a live auction is going to yield you about 100 to 110% of value. So now in a silent auction, I'm raising $40. In a live auction, maybe $100. And all of my effort and energy that goes into a silent auction is actually costing me to raise money. But what we've seen is a lot of folks have moved to an online auction because an online auction allows you from a more equity focus to be able to have a community-centric model where everyone can participate. You can broadcast it out to your entire community. The online auction can even be hosted independent from your event. And we're seeing that the same value item is selling for about 80 to 85% of value. So moving to an online auction has become very popular in the past couple of years. The other element that I want to make sure you do is that you are managing your audience and getting them focused. If you have traffic jams, barriers to participation, if you have obstacles to engagement, people will not engage. They will choose to opt out because it's easier than navigating the barriers. So think about your room setup, make sure you have a venue that accommodates all your needs. But most importantly, you want to get people seated for any fundraising and program that you have. Because ultimately, we want our program to create an emotional connection and allows people to be recognized for their support. Now, we have seen that there is a group dynamic at play at every event where folks come into that event sort of low in their engagement. They've been dealing with traffic and parking and they're not sure where to go and they're not sure what to do. But as they start to get oriented to the event, they quickly start to see for themselves where registration is, where the bar is. They see someone they know, they begin talking and catching up, and their engagement level rises. And then there's a natural moment in the event where you've had enough to eat, you're thinking about your babysitter, you got to go home, and your engagement level naturally decreases. The number one thing you can do to impact your fundraising and to improve your program and to leave people feeling really excited about your event is to focus your fundraising at the height of that natural group dynamic event arc. That time when folks are most engaged is your time for fundraising. Now, we have an entire webinar that is a beat by beat breakdown from Kristen Steele, our creative director, about this event arc and how to design your program. But I really want you to think about the fact that audiences are changing, are evolving, and our programs matter. And having a program that is not about a theme, but is about our mission and our organization is a critical element to being able to raise money these days. Now, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that we are doing a lot of hybrid events. This is fantastic if you have an audience that is international, if you have an audience that is across the state, If you have an audience that can't all gather in one location, hybrid has been a way for us to be more community centric and to broadcast our event for folks to be able to tune in from around the country. We actually have this event coming up in a couple of weeks on March 16th. It's free to be able to tune into. And it's an opportunity for you if you want to see what it's like to be a guest to a hybrid event. It is a daytime event on Sunday. It's a brunch event. If you tune in at 11:30 for Equivox, which is the Hedgebrook event, you can check it out and learn all about what it's like to be a home viewer of a hybrid event if you want to test it out for yourself. Now, Equivox you can find at avcast.me/Equivox, and it's a great opportunity to learn more about hybrid events, how they work, how they function, and what the guest experience is like. Finally, I would be remiss if I didn't talk about the importance of building your budget. I believe that every great event strategy begins by having a clear budget. We have a budget template that is available for you online. You can purchase our budget tool. But the key thing that I want to highlight for you in your budget is that not only are you working toward a fundraising goal, but you should be mapping a path toward how you reach that fundraising goal. The way that we map that path is that we build out our ticket sales, table sales, sponsorship levels in advance and start to identify and predetermine who our target prospects are for each of those levels. That way we know going into the event if we have a path to meeting our fundraising goals. We do the same with our paddle raise to understand what our path is and who some of those big donors might be that start us off in our high level giving. That way we know that not only are we designing an event specific to purpose and mission, but we also have a path to reach those fundraising goals. Now, there have been some trends that I want to highlight that have changed a little bit in spending because the cost of producing an event has gone up exponentially in the past several years. Key areas to spend your budget money on: good sound quality so people can hear your program, and a professional benefit auctioneer who truly understand how to help you raise money. We don't recommend that you spend a lot of money on your decor or gifts for your guests. Those are often things that get overlooked. Additionally, we've seen a lot of folks modify how they're doing food service in order to reduce their catering bill and have moved away from the single plated dinner and have moved into things like family style dinner to reduce labor costs, where platters are delivered to the table and passed around, or even food stations to reduce labor costs. So there's a couple of ways that you can approach food service to reduce some of your budget expenses. But ultimately, folks are coming to events for two things. They're coming to learn more about you and have an experience with you. So your event should be focused on you. It doesn't need to be an event based on a theme that has nothing to do with your work, but should be an event that is focused on you and what you do and your mission. Additionally, people come because they want that time for connection and community. So leave room for it. All religions and all social justice movements are centered on gathering. And this is an opportunity for you to build and gather people around your mission. A few trends for you to think about as you're starting to sort of think about all the big ideas. One, design for purpose, have a short, tight event that is curated to a specific audience. Leverage technology in your favor with things like a hybrid event or a text to give platform, and consider small gatherings as an opportunity for you to curate and cultivate very specific audiences. Mission should be at the center of everything. It should be mission centered, mission themed, mission story, and mission impact. Having themes that have nothing to do with your mission or who you are or what you do are no longer in style, and now themes are very specific to who you are, your mission, and who you serve. Finally, if you're thinking about just some elements to integrate and sort of up-level your game, AI is definitely being used in events now. There are lots of opportunities for you to use AI in writing your auction package descriptions, communicating to your attendees. Also, texting donors is becoming very trendy. A lot of donors live in text now more than they do in phone calls or emails. So texting donors is something that's been integrated into most auction apps. We're finding that consignment online auctions are a very trendy way for you to have a low sort of effort, high yield auction for your organization. We have consignment partners like Winspire and Auction Packages, Sojourn Ventures that all do incredible online auctions. They can help you customize your auction to develop something that would work best for your audience. And finally, hybrid and virtual events as a way to meet people where they're at. Especially now, a hybrid event is a way for you to have a backup plan, as we're hearing words, things like quademic being passed around. A hybrid event is another way for you to think about reaching a bigger audience, but also having a backup plan. So this is a light touch. We're going to dive into so many of these elements at Elevate. We hope that you'll join us for our 2-day conference. If you're already signed up, we're so excited to have you there. The conference is a hybrid event, and we will be demoing for you a lot of best practices about how to do a hybrid event. So you'll get to have that experience of learning as we go in the 2-day deep dive. We want to thank all of our sponsors, thank all of our speakers that will be at Elevate, and we want to thank you. We look forward to having you.